Digging deep into the scams and data breaches and building on the conversation we had earlier today around digital currencies is David Nichols, the co-founder and chief risk officer of Stables Money, which enables customers to spend, send and earn on their stablecoin balance. David has had a diverse exposure to a broad spectrum of global customers across an array of financial products and services via a smorgasbord of risk areas, and I bet he gets the best text message scams on the phone. Is your mum at Woolies or Coles when she needs you to send money?
Currently Audi, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it this afternoon.
Then Shane Chanel is the founder and CEO of Yonder Money. Shane has over 15 years of experience in banking, finance and SME businesses, along with specific experience in fintech, transactional banking, capital markets, product, business development, asset management, debt and equity markets. Give him a hand. And finally, we've got James Sibic, who is the Director of Cybersecurity and Intelligence at Ekata. With 10 years' experience working in the e-commerce, tech and financial institutions across the payment space, he's been at the forefront of digital transformation with recent experience in identity and security. This will be a really interesting panel, so without further ado, Caroline, over to you. What happened to Sinead? It wasn't last night at the VIP dinner, was it?
Well, Sinead is actually here, but her voice is not. Now, I can assure you, as a lawyer, that it is genuine laryngitis, and not just because she's been chin-wagging outside in the foyer too much. And it's actually quite funny because, and a shame, that she cannot be on stage today because she has such a wealth of knowledge and she loves to talk, especially about this topic, which is, I have to be reminded, scams, breaches, and mitigating their impacts. I guess the only other funny thing, because it is the graveyard shift to say, is that Sinead and I are actually tag team quite a bit, and we say that I'm the fin to her tech, and she's the tech to my fin. So that gives you a bit of an insight into how we collaborate in helping and enabling fintechs, many of you who are here today. So I'm very happy to help you, Sinead. Thank you for dropping me in this. Now, as I said, I know this is the graveyard shift, and there have been a few sessions on scams already today. In the session, we're trying to have slightly different focus, being on addressing the customer impacts, or the impact to customer growth resulting from the aftermath of a scam. So less on the prevention, but how do you deal with the aftermath once it's actually happened? So the possible fines, class actions, reputational damage, and of course loss of business. Just to recap on what impact we are talking about here, it just helps to reinforce. We know that the global impact, the global amount of fraud annually exceeds $1 trillion, and in Australia, scams robbed customers of more than $2 billion last year alone. So the government has had to respond, and as we heard from Minister Jones yesterday morning in his address, that scams and frauds are a priority for the government. From the perspective of regulation, industry action, and government intervention via its well-touted National Anti-Scam Centre, all designed to raise standards and enhance security. And they're going to be starting critically with key sectors such as banking, telcos and social media. So my opening question to the panellists here today are, what are your views on what are the critical areas that government should prioritise on intervention? James, perhaps I'll start with you in the corner over there.
Yeah, sure, as I'm on the end here. Yeah, so for me, government really, their primary part to play, and this is really around facilitation, but then as well as education. So facilitating, bringing together the businesses to push through with new agendas. So I said, bringing together for the National Anti-Scam Centre, it's really there. They need to be enforcing that something needs to be done. Because if you just leave them to do it themselves, you'll be looking 5, 10 years later, and by that time, too much has happened already. So really trying to enforce that. Same with CDRs we've seen. You actually need to get it being used in the wider ecosystem. Education-wise as well, especially talking about scams, is educating our consumers. So actually making people aware of what they should be looking out for. At the moment, it's left to businesses to be able to do this themselves. We log into an app and say, we will no longer send you links via email. The government should be doing that and putting money towards educating those that are digitally enabled, but as well as those that are not, those that are vulnerable. We should also be looking out for those people ourselves, but the government should also play a role in that, in my opinion.
Yeah, let me continue it. So look, I think we all obviously have a role to play in detecting, preventing scams and data breaches of all different kinds. So I very much welcome the government's initiatives in terms of that, and I think it's a space that's constantly evolving both in Australia and around the world. I think us as sort of leaders within the fintech space, we obviously have to play our part as well. So I mean, we're Stables Money, so we're a digital currency exchange which is deliberately almost lent into the regulatory, the risk, the compliance, governance and legal side to make sure that our customers actually feel safe when we're interacting. And I think the government's activities and interactions are a good start. And then I think it's where the industry actually takes hold of that and also helps guide our customers to protect themselves as well.
Shane, did you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, look, just to add to that, I mean, the government is probably about 4 years away, as indicated. And I'm probably going to take a bit more of an operational stab at what we can do internally. The fraudsters are getting smarter and smarter, right? I was talking to someone yesterday, and we were saying if they just focused all their energy on actually doing good, they'd probably make $1 trillion, right? Like they're getting so smart these days. And we've at Yonder Money we've implemented a lot of transaction monitoring rules. We see scams and frauds as being two different things, right? Scams we see as being after the fact, and fraud is the process of it. And with these transaction monitoring rules, there's so many things that we monitor for, velocities to amounts, etc. But ultimately, these are static, right? And these guys are getting so smart that you have to consistently evolve. And I think that's where AI potentially comes in and helps out. We've recently done a deal with MasterCard and OpenAI's private network to try to find anomalies within data sets that we've fed it. And as part of that, I mean, if you can try to break something while it's happening, you've got a chance, because otherwise you're falling back on static rules.
It's an interesting observation that as part of the government's focus that it doesn't expressly include this in FinTech sector in the banking sector review. So I guess it's a no-brainer, but any comments on whether it should or shouldn't be?
Look, I think even if the regulation hasn't quite caught up, we as participants of the industry with customers whose data is incredibly important and even if the law strictly doesn't say that we should be doing it, and as someone that's sort of had 20 plus years in banking and financial services, so we're almost building our currency exchange deliberately so it's bank grade. So with all of the controls that you'd expect to see. So just because the law sort of hasn't quite caught up and is 4 years away, I think it sets a pretty good framework for what we should be doing. And it's almost then looking at the commercial benefits of actually implementing a robust risk and control framework for the benefits of the customers and for the commercial reasons as well. So a good start, and we embrace it.
Yeah, because it's all going to take time, these reviews, and the time for the legislation to come into force and the like. So I guess we're focusing on now and what fintechs in particular in the sector can do to, and again focusing on the impacts to aftermath. What things can the fintech industry, or what are they doing now that you think are particularly pertinent or things that every fintech should be getting on with in terms of mitigating fraud and scam risks to businesses in particular?
Yeah, look, I can only talk at an operational level as opposed to with this. Look, I guess there's, if you put my lens on, we've got sales or customer onboarding targets to hit, as well as making sure the security is on point, right? So it's a fine juggling act in between making sure customer experience rather is still okay, and managing the risks of it. So we've done a massive overhaul of our onboarding experience, for example, and we introduced liveness checks quite recently, right? When I say quite recently, a few months ago. We found a little case doing all the back testing, and we're like, oh, there's a bit of an anomaly here, right? So we requested the data. So when a liveness check happens, it's essentially a selfie recording, right, that it takes. I think individuals think it's taking a photo, but it's actually a video. So we found this fellow who we can clearly see, he's some other random dude, it's not the person, and he takes this printout copy of a face and tries to put it in front of the camera, right? And, oh, great. So, I think as a fintech, we've had to build a lot of these bits of infrastructure, and I think touch wood, we're pretty lucky. We can innovate. We've even started to do a lot of the cursor movement, not cursor movement necessarily, but how the customer uses the app itself. Those are sort of innovations that we're bringing in already, and unfortunately with legacy state platforms, and that's where 85% of the market is, unfortunately, they take a lot of time to deliver on those technologies, right? So, that's the main things we can do.
James, you have?
Yeah, I think really fintech's going to drive the technology part of this, and then legacies will start to come along on the journey. They will be the ones we'll be collaborating with, so it will really drive that. In terms of what fintechs themselves can do, everyone needs to grow. So what Shane says about that customer experience against the fraud or the risk or the scams, the fear, basically. You need to make sure you balance all of that out. So fintechs will naturally be able to implement those because they have that direct need to become trusted by those customers because they want to then experience their customer lifetime value or anything like that. So fintechs will drive that technology and eventually everyone will catch up. So what were you saying about the government before? Yes, they've formed the Anti-Scam Centre. A lot of them, some of the tech companies are in there. Some of the traditional banks because they've got the majority of the data, but the technology that catches up with it, more to David's point, is like you have to design everything with that privacy in mind, with all of that risk in mind as well.
Yeah, and I guess from our perspective, I always use the fort analogy. So when I'm running regular trainings with our product guys and our ops team, we actually feel that it should almost be at times a bit of a friction point to actually onboard and to come into the fortress. Obviously, we're doing robust KYC and enhanced due diligence where required. And then almost when our customers are in the fortress, we feel it's our job to help them feel safe as they're interacting in the marketplace. So everything from transaction monitoring, we obviously have to look at both the fiat side, so it's called the Aussie dollar side, but also these weird and wonderful digital assets and how they interact with technology and the use of sort of things like AI and almost dynamic rules that are based on behavioural analytics, and it's almost a new world. So gone are the days of transaction monitoring and monitoring that marketplace within the fortress, where you can be quite passive and not really review your rules and things like that. From our perspective, because the technology is evolving so rapidly, and we run a global business with the help of MasterCard and some other amazing partners all around the world. So we, majority of the time, never actually meet our customer face-to-face. So gone are the days of the old banking analogy where someone will stumble into the bank and show their ID. Now the technology and the systems and solutioning has got to be good enough that most fintechs will never actually physically meet their customer. So therefore, you've got to go above and beyond to keep your customers safe in your respective fortress, so then others are safe in the ecosystem as well.
Great answers. So here's one. It's a little bit different, or is the proposed digital ID scheme the solution? I'll leave that as a very
let me kick it off. So look, I think it's part of the solution, and in a space such as identity, where you almost think of, so what is a person's identity anymore? So it's obviously a combination of different data points that come together with history and with things like getting a loan application, getting a driver's license, all those things. The true global citizen is well and truly global. People are travelling more than ever for work. They've got financial flows that are cross-border. So what Australia's doing in this space is a great step forward. I probably don't think it's going to solve every single problem that we've ever had and every challenge, but I certainly think it's a great step forward. And potentially we should also look at what's going on around the world and sort of see what different solutions can help Australia as well.
Yeah, I mean, as Dave said, it's definitely part of the solution. It's a very, very key part. Yes, is it going to solve every problem? No, because you have the underserved, the non-digital natives. You've got your older generations that won't be able to solve for that. But if we talk about, and again, with the topic being around data breaches, the data minimization principles really do play into everything. So it's going to form a part of it, from the protection, again, keeping those users safe once you onboard them. It will form part of the onboarding as well, to know you've got a good customer, not a bad customer. But again, there are other pieces around, because, they say, an identity is not just what we've traditionally seen, what you've had is like your government-issued credential. It's your digital identity as you're online in the different worlds, if you're in the metaverse or anything like that.
Our CTO actually works for ANTO and on the digital ID project, so we asked him about this a while ago, and ultimately his response was, depends on if you have something to hide, right? If you don't have anything to hide, there's no reason why you wouldn't sign up to it, because ultimately it's going to help you with applications or whatever the case may be. But I think also cost to serve, right? It depends on what we start to apply this for. Does that mean things for random things which aren't essential? Is it the cost to purchase that as a mandatory item? Is that going to start to go up, right? I mean, those are considerations you've got to take.
So just to jump in as well, I think as well, going back to the first point where I mentioned about what should government be doing, is like promoting that digital identity as well. So we've done work in the industry already. I think we've got over 1 million enrolled reusable identities through one of our partners. So those are already in market, and we've done trials with Service New South Wales as well. So that's already in the market, but again, it's not that well advertised. You started to see that post-data breaches, it got more promoted, but again, are people aware that this is happening in there to be able to take advantage of it? So again, it's not well educated within the general ecosystem. People aren't going to be able to utilize it to the fullest extent.
So if we look to the UK now and the new requirement for UK banks and other payment companies to compensate fraud victims who have been tricked into sending money to scammers, is that the correct approach here in Australia, do you think?
Let me kick it off, and I won't be too controversial, but I think it's certainly, it's a really interesting move because it puts all emphasis on the company, and there's the potential for the customer to almost take advantage of that. So I think the principle and the idea makes perfect sense, and as I said, we're all here for the right reasons and to fight those financial crimes. I think within Australia, and especially because we're a bit of a smaller market as well, having the data and the analytics to almost say, well, a customer's potentially claimed multiple times that there's been a fraud, so maybe there's something a little bit more to it. So I certainly think it's a good step forward, and obviously puts businesses and fintechs and everyone on notice that there's an expectation from both regulators and almost the industry to do more. I just think it's a balanced approach between managing that risk, which is very important, but also being highly commercial and practical and making sure that the data actually does reflect the situation of what's going on.
Yeah, so it can be quite a hand grenade question, that one. I think, as Dave says, yes, it puts all the emphasis onto the companies to make sure they're doing protections. But what that has done is has hurried people along to have that innovation. We, as Mastercard, we are actually involved with protecting the banks to ensure that they can then protect their users through, exactly as Shane says, looking at things around like transaction velocity, timings, or stuff like that. And yeah, Mastercard will play a role of that. It will probably have a role to play here as well, especially for the National Anti-Scam Centre. So I think as well, the government will probably be waiting to see some of the outcomes from what the findings are within that, because the banks will probably be saying, no, we don't want to become liable for this. But at the same time, it can unfortunately happen to anyone. We'll come up here and we'll talk about scams, but we could get scammed ourselves. All it takes is one very momentary lapse.
It's 4 o'clock apparently.
And you get caught.
Scams happen.
Did you get scammed as your voice there, Sinead? So I think it will eventually come, but again, everyone does need to take their own responsibility for themselves and their own safety. But then, yes, we should also know that our trusted banks or telcos or social media companies also do have our back, and that is a key part of it.
Shane?
Yeah, to add to that, look, I think it's a great move, like as James said, and I'm going to copy and paste what David said as well. It is going to inspire innovation and force companies to move, but it also comes down to, teach a man to fish or give him fish, right? Like, we can't say, we're not going to take any responsibility for our actions. It's like, we can just go out and run someone over and not pay a penalty for that, right? So, I mean, I think it's not to that extent, of course, but there needs to be a little bit of education at least. I mean, one of the first things we do in the first couple of welcome emails that we send out is, at Yonder, we are never going to ask you these details, right? And we're never going to ask this for you, blah blah blah. So I think education plays a big piece. The banks definitely need to pick up their game, but again, it's a balancing act, right?
Fantastic. Okay, so we're not just talking about scams and fraud here, but also, I guess, the consequences of data breaches and their impacts, particularly when it comes to personal information. So we know with recent changes to the Privacy Act and the maximum regulatory fines of a serious breach of privacy now being 10% of annual turnover, whereas it was previously 2.2 million. And if the proposed reforms are introduced, individuals will now be able to take direct action against the company, and this will, increase class actions, etc. So the thinking is that we can't see a breach of privacy any longer as being just viewed as the cost of doing business. The impacts to customer growth here are immeasurable. So. And we can see that from high-level from breaches such as Latitude and Medibank, etc. So with that in mind, accepting that a breach of privacy can no longer be seen as the cost of doing business, what would be your top tip for this room in terms of mitigating those ever-expanding impacts to customer growth and spend in particular?
Sure, let me kick it off. So I think as a high-level comment, privacy and data is obviously king, and almost the regulatory and the legal side should be a significant factor, but obviously it's also the reputational risk as well. So I mean, if you're a fintech out there, imagine being on the front page of the Fin Review for something negative. That's almost destroying your ability to raise further capital. Obviously, your existing customers won't be happy. In terms of the main thing that I think helps really solve this problem is almost from a solution architecture perspective. And what I mean by that is almost the combination of different vendors that sort of come into your ecosystem to provide your services, and also how you almost set up your internal procedures and processes. Because you don't want a vendor that's going to be the weak link, because you're ultimately the one that's going to be responsible, whether that be from the regulatory fines or the reputational damage or being unable to raise further capital because you've had a negative story on the Fin Review. So that's solution architecture, so almost the external vendors you're picking, and then the internal robustness of having regular trainings, lots of policies and procedures.
Music to my ears.
Good to hear.
I mean, we all like food, right? It's like going to a restaurant for the first time and the food being terrible, and then you're probably never going to go back there again, right? But if it's your favourite restaurant and you're going there all the time and they get it wrong once, you might go back. And as a fintech, we suffer the same fate, right? We've invested a lot into our own infrastructure and making sure that we don't screw it up, because the risk is so high. If we do screw it up, you're done, right? As David said. And even initially, we've found that customers, when they first join, they'll put in $100 or $1,000, right? And then maybe 6 months in, they'll put a little bit more in, right? And transaction volumes increase and the rest of it. Yeah, so look, I mean, I think it should be forefront of any tech company or FinTech or any business really, because that reputational risk is not worth losing.
I guess for me, the main tip is don't wait and don't think it won't happen to you. A lot of people, that's the thing, so it won't happen to me, it won't happen to me. There are bigger fish to fry. So no, the fraudsters or the scammers or anyone like that want to go for, or the criminal groups, is the weak link. And if that is you, that is you. And what they might do is they might rinse and repeat, so they might take, all types of attacks always happen in tranches. They might test, one big hit. And then if they can repeat that constantly across multiple different businesses, they're going to continuously do that. So don't wait. The other thing is have robust systems. Don't have like one system to stop things. It's a bit of a layered approach through this. Ask yourselves, why are you retaining all of this data? I think that's something that really has come out of the past year, is why am I retaining so much data? Why am I still holding paper of something? Why have I not digitized this? But then again, when we go into the digital identity framework, why am I holding all of this? Do I need to know someone's date of birth, or do I just need to know that they are over 18? And from a cyber health piece, monitor your cyber health, monitor your suppliers, ensure that your entire supply chain is continuously validated. You are responsible for that. And again, whilst you think you are good and it won't happen to you, it will happen to you, or it might happen to one of your partners. In FinTech, we're working with partners, we're collaborating a lot. It's very, very key that we do that. So don't wait and don't think it won't be happening to you at some point.
Yeah, and especially in the case of Latitude, right? It wasn't Latitude that got penetrated, it was one of the partners. So third-party risk is something that we've had to pay a lot of focus to and increase focus to, and it sucks because 95% of our time goes to managing 1% of the exceptions, right? But you've unfortunately just got to do it.
And I'd probably just add to that. So from a few other sessions, a key theme that's come out over the Great Intersekt conference is almost the collaboration. So we've got industry leaders both in this room and who have been interacting. We've got industry associations like the FinTech Association, Blockchain Association, DeFi Association. So I think there's a common will within the industry to actually help each other prevent these things. And there's obviously sort of different ways that scams can be reported and data privacy breaches. But collaboration, if you take nothing else away from Intersekt, I mean, that's kind of why you come to something like this, is to meet other people, to interact and to fight the good fight on financial crimes and prevent data breaches as well.
Well said, well said. Well, we've got 1 or 2 minutes left. Does anyone in the audience have any questions that they'd like to put to the panellists?
One down there.
Be brave, we don't bite too much.
While I do this, I do want to ask you, I know you didn't realise the mics are on, so I'm just wondering, are there any secrets that have the big banks terrified that you want to share with us?
No comment.
It's one of my favourite scams, and I work for David Koch, and his face is on so many of these scams along the way that it's just hilarious. Mate, he never gives me the secrets. Now, here he is.
Thank you. Thanks for the good insights. So we know that bigger fintech businesses can invest and have big compliance teams, but what about startups like very early stage, let's say less than 10 people? What can they do to protect themselves?
Yeah, sure. Let me kick it off. So as the Chief Risk Officer of Stables Money, my fellow co-founders actually thought the money spent to get someone in-house was well and truly justified. And I think gone are the days of just the compliance box ticking. Now, risk management should be a strategic commercial operation. If you can't afford to get in-house, sure, there's a number of great risk consultants out there. I won't give anyone in particular a plug, but there's many out there across different industries that can help you different parts. Also, there's some great law firms as well that can obviously help you with some policies, procedures. I'll give Gaydens a bit of a plug for that one.
Thank you.
I want to ask a quick one too. Generative AI, how worried should we be when it comes to scams and data breaches?
I say,
That's a good question.
It's two sides of the same coin. Yes, it's a problem, but also you use AI to combat them. It needs to be. Yes, it's going to happen more and more and more. You're going to see more deepfakes going around. We're already seeing how much people are utilizing, generated voices to get around voice recognition software. But again, you've got AI capabilities. If you're still back 10, 20 years ago and you've got a manual process and criminal rings are utilizing AI, then you're on a losing battle all the time. So you need to leverage that technology yourselves to get through it. And again, not really be afraid of it.
So Shane, it might have helped with that guy lifting the piece of paper up in front of his face.
Yeah, well, I hope so, right? Well, if it failed at that time, but yeah, no. Look, deepfakes is going to be an issue, but that's where people like Ekata and the MasterCard come in, right? And we're just going to have to leverage the best of the best technologies to get around it.
You got furious nodding from Sinead on that one too.
Reduce your data. That's how I'll translate for her. Well, thank you very, very much, James, Shane and David, for your time today, especially on the graveyard shift. But yeah, thank you. Bye.
Cheers.
Thank you.